and welcome to this morning's live. Now, I promised I'd get him back and delighted to say that Fergal Cantwell is joining us again to talk about retrofitting and grants. There were just so many questions when he was last with us that we just didn't get a chance to go through everything. So delighted that he's going to join us again this morning and go through all of the questions that we missed and all of the questions that you guys have sent in over the last couple of days. So thanks so much for that. So I see Fergal waiting there, and
Hi Denise, how are you? Sorry, you're on mute for some reason.
let's see.
I have you now. Sorry.
Yes, you got me. I think it was it was the earbuds were causing trouble. How are you this morning? Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. Great.
No, you're very good. And I was just saying in the intro that we just got so many questions that we had to have you back because we couldn't possibly get through them all. And we've had a bunch more now over the last couple of days. So hopefully we'll be able to clear up all the queries and help people on their way to availing of these grants.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Brilliant. So I think, Fergal, you were saying the last time, and I thought it was really interesting, that there are 3 different types of homeowner who are renovating at the moment. Do you want to just kind of capture that again and chat about that? Because it brings me to one of the questions, which was somebody saying, like, he sees loads of people doing work and doing retrofitting work, but barely any of them that he's been talking to are availing of the grants.
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to what's being advised out there. Like people not claiming grants or being told that it's not worth claiming the grant or it's more expensive if you go down the grant route. But I think, as I was saying the last day, that I suppose, like for ourselves who are under SEI inspection regulations, there are certain standards that we have to meet. So obviously, I always give the attic as an example. So obviously, it's cheaper to get someone to roll out 300 mil of rock wool in your attic and leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the standards that we have to meet, so there's all kinds of things to take into it. Like ventilation is a big thing in an attic. Obviously, there's a cost for that. Lagging pipes, cold water storage tank. You have to have the attic hatch sealed and insulated. So it all adds up. And if people aren't claiming grants, I'd be concerned about the standard of work that they're getting completed. Obviously, there's no inspections if there's no grants.
No, exactly. And you're so right. Like there's a quick way to do it and an easy way to do it, and then there's the right way to do it. So it is just to bear that in mind, because you get lots of people asking about that, like the cost differences in the quotes and is it worth their while and all the rest of it. But I suppose that's the critical point, is that it's the standard of the workmanship. It's making sure that it's being done in such a way that it's going to pass inspection, which is critical, really, when you're getting this kind of work done. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So maybe we just jump in and like go through these questions, Fergal. I know I sent them to you, most of them, but we did get a couple more. So one of the first ones actually, and this came up a lot over the last few days, is there any way of calculating or just estimating the average price to retrofit a property? Somebody asking about a semi-detached to get it fully done. Like, is there a rule of thumb that people could just...
Yeah, generally with a semi-detached, I would say that if you're lucky enough to have cavity walls and you're able to pump them, it reduces the cost. So you're looking at anything up to, I would always say, like, I hate giving figures because then someone contacts me and it's a lot less.
I know.
But what I'm saying is that about 40,000 for a full retrofit, that would give you 14,000 of a grant. There's about 2,000 in energy credits. So anywhere in the region of 24,000, 25,000 of a spend is what's going to cost the homeowner to have 40,000 worth of work done.
Okay.
So, I mean, it is what it is, and people find it hard to distinguish between myself and SAI, and they email me giving out that the grants are not high enough, and but it is a substantial grant when you look at it like that. I mean, 40,000 were now. Obviously, then, if you went the external insulation route, you're probably looking at more like 60,000. Now, your grant goes up obviously as well, so you probably get 20-odd thousand of a grant, and again, your couple of thousand in energy credits. So that's more like the 36, 37 grand range of spend for the homeowner. But the external insulation is an expensive solution.
It is, isn't it? And actually, we got a question about that. I just have a look at this here. Yeah, this is interesting. So, what are asking about the energy grants? They're saying they've just started a large renovation project, and they're hoping to get the full 6,000 for external wall insulation. But the previous owner applied in 2014 for the €400 grant to fill the cavity walls. Does that mean that they can't get that 6,000 grant?
No, they can't.
They can. Okay, brilliant. Because he's saying the house
can't. Sorry, Denise.
Oh, they can't.
No.
Oh, crikey. Yeah. Okay.
So the grant system works on, it's not the homeowner, it's the home. So it's worked off MPRN, which is your meter point reference number. So your ESB meter box. So any grant that's claimed is logged using your MPRN. And
Okay.
if you're trying to claim a grant, your MPRN is used, and that will raise a red flag that there's already been a wall grant claimed. Now, I know the insulation industry are lobbying with SEI over this because obviously a cavity wall grant of €400 versus 6,000 of an external insulation grant, it doesn't seem to sit right that you can't claim the external grant. Plus the fact that if you are going external and you have cavity walls, you have to pump the cavities anyway. You can't put external insulation without pumping the cavities.
Okay.
So at the minute, no, you can't claim the grant twice is what they're calling it because it's a wall measure. And it even gets worse that if you claimed for an oil or gas boiler upgrade, you're not eligible for a heat pump upgrade.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that does sound like it needs to be evaluated,
it does,
doesn't it? Because well, particularly the wall insulation, because if you're having to pump the wall anyway, it's like if you've taken the first step, so why not just deduct that €400 from the 6,000? And
even if they did that,
yeah.
But as it stands at the minute, as soon as you put in the MPRN, that it's kind of null and void.
Okay.
Process it,
Okay. Well, that's a really good point, just for people to know, and especially if you just bought a house, to try and figure out what work has been done. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously the house doesn't come with an instruction manual about what was applied for. You only find out when you go to apply.
Okay.
And that's the problem with it,
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, really interesting. Brilliant. So there were a number of questions just about that, like can people apply? So I think that's, if they've done one measure to get the next measure for the insulation, so that sort of covers that. But somebody asking that they've a 1930s red brick cavity built house. Can the house be drilled internally because the mortar joints, she's been told, are very tight to drill it from outside?
Yeah, but it'd be very unusual to do it. I suppose the cavity wall, the installers are so good at patching up the holes that they put in. It's very hard to distinguish where the holes went in. I would look at talking to an installer and seeing what I don't know how tight the joints are, but I'm sure you could still get a hole in the joint to get it in. It's hugely disruptive to try and do that from the inside.
Yeah, I can imagine. It will be very messy. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Great. And then there's an interesting question. So somebody's saying that if they're renovating and looking at the grants and then they intend to build an extension as well, do they need to do them separately, or can they do them all at the same time? Are there contractors that will do the whole lot, I guess is what they're...
They can run concurrently, but most are just speaking from environment retrofit point of view, we don't get involved in general building work.
Okay.
So whatever is applied for a grant is what we will complete. Obviously, they can run side by side, but there's a bit of coordination between two contractors then. Like that can run fine, but it also can be messy in terms of timelines and this is ready to go, and whereas both contractors are working on their own schedules kind of thing. So look at it's of course it's possible, and it's about good communication really. And yes, there's no problem doing it. I suppose the problem with the grant side of things is that they're only looking at the existing building. So extension is really something outside of that, obviously.
Sure.
And outside of, but when it comes to inspections, then the house has to be weather tight and everything has to be up and running for inspection, which would include the extension, because that will be taken into account in the post-works BER cert. So, everything has to be, now they don't expect paint on the walls, or you don't have to have the kitchen in, but if you do have heat pumps, it has to be up and running and commissioned. So you couldn't have a hole in the wall out to an extension and that side of the house not complete. So there's just a bit more planning involved in doing it. I would say 70% of people that come to it are building an extension. It's something, it can, of course, be done, but a bit more thought put into it. So.
Okay, so just more coordination. Okay,
Yeah,
brilliant.
exactly.
Brilliant. Okay. So then somebody asking, sorry. Yes. Do you need, so just the air tightness tests and stuff, can you just explain about that? There's somebody asking about, just to comply with regulations, what's required.
Yeah, so the new NZEB regulations, the old regulations were you had to have 7 or below. It used to be 10, but now we're gone down to 5. And just to give an idea of what these numbers mean, it's 5 cubic meters per meter squared per hour of air infiltration or lock. So Tomas O'Leary, our old friend, has a great analogy of that. So he would say that a washing machine is about a cubic meter, so it's a meter wide by depth by height. So what they do is they pressurize your house up to a pressurization of 50 pascals and see how much air leaves that house, and that's what these numbers mean, the 5 and the 7. So if you think of 5, the volume of 5 washing machines of air leaving the house per hour, that's what a score of 5 is, which sounds very bad, but remember the house is actually pressurized.
Yes,
so
yeah.
On purpose.
Yeah.
So if you go below 3, you have to install mechanical ventilation. Above, between 3 and 5, you can still have natural ventilation.
Oh, very good. Okay, and that answers another question, actually. Yeah, so that's really good. Great. Yeah.
So, like people talk about air tightness and retrofit, unless you are concentrating on air tightness, and that would mean actually taking down ceilings and looking at walls, putting on membranes on ceilings, walls, all that kind of thing. So if you look at a retrofit that just happens without any concentration on air tightness, by accident you're improving your air tightness.
Okay.
I mean, you're insulating your walls, whichever way you're doing it, it's improving your air tightness. Your windows are fitted a lot tighter, and they're usually set in with a foam, or you can put air tightness tape around the windows. So that's your improvement nearly by accident. To concentrate on maybe getting down to passive house levels, you're taking the whole house apart. It's a different way of doing it. Like most of these retrofits, the occupier stays in the house during the retrofit, and as you can imagine, if they start taking down ceilings and everything, you're not going to be.
No, it's very messy. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Fergal. That's great. Brilliant. And then, somebody's saying, so are there new or changes to the grants coming in the next couple of years, or what can people expect, say, for next year and beyond?
There's probably there's a bit of confusion in between. People are calling the Deep Retrofit Grant, which was a pilot scheme, and it was around for 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's the one that all the controversy is going to close down. So that's actually gone. So the vehicle at the minute is the National Home Retrofit Scheme.
Yeah.
That's a 35% grant. Now, at the minute, there's an application process which kind of slows down the whole process itself. So they are changing the system in terms of they're going to set up a register of one-stop shops. Instead of an application, the one-stop shops will be allocated pre-approved funding, and they'll have set grant amounts based on 35% of all the information they've got in over the last few years. So the application process will be gone. Everything should speed up. Deliveries will speed up. So essentially, at the minute, if I was talking to you and you wanted to retrofit your house, I would apply for the grant. It could be 4 to 6 weeks or even more to get back approval. So with that out of the way, I can essentially agree with you on a Friday evening and start on Monday morning kind of thing. So yeah, they're striving just to streamline this whole process a lot better.
Okay.
There won't be a whole lot of change, well, from what we hear, because we haven't seen the guidelines yet, but there's not going to be a whole lot of change in funding amounts, but it should just streamline better in that the one-stop shops will be just claiming the grants in the background kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the homeowners will be paying cost minus grants.
Okay. Okay. That does seem more straightforward. Definitely, that makes complete sense. Yeah, complete sense.
Yeah, and I think they're gonna publish a list of the grants so that it's not in the dark, and so everyone will know what grants are available. Which is a good idea. It's all very transparent then, and everyone knows what they can claim for.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful, Fergal. Brilliant. And then somebody, so this I thought was an interesting question, and again, it's just quite common. So somebody's saying that they're retrofitting a 1980s bungalow, and they're asking, what is the minimum rating you should be aiming for? How do you determine the best and most economical way of achieving this rating? And they're saying then that the BER assessor provided an advisory report, but it was very general and non-specific.
Yeah, so again, there's, with each BER cert, every BER cert that's published, there's an advisory report published with it. But that advisory report is a generic change your light bulbs, insulate your walls, change your windows. There's no specific information in it. And when we say that we need an energy upgrade report from a BER assessor, people will always send me on that one first. There's no information in it for me to use.
No.
So what you need is an actual upgrade report or a technical assessment.
Technical assessment, yeah. Okay.
So basically what you want to see in a report is what U values the walls and windows and all your elements are at the minute, and what it will take to achieve a B2. Now, the question was, what should she be striving for in terms of B2?
A couple of things. So you've answered, she's saying what report can she get that's very specific, and then what should she be striving to do? Yeah.
So through the grant, you're going to have to achieve a B2 minimum. I suppose that's the answer in terms of you can obviously go above and beyond that. When you have your upgrade report, you see exactly all the options. So they'll put in every option they can to bring you up to an A, how far you can go. And it's up to you then whether you want to go above and beyond the B2. But the B2 is the standard, and that's what the grants are based on.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Great. And like as Tomas would say, go for the absolute highest spec you can afford, because why not? Yeah, no, definitely. Okay. And then somebody asking about extract ventilation, and do they need to have vents in every single room? Is it only wet rooms if they're venting the house?
So as we were talking about air tightness, it happened by accident in terms of retrofitting anyway. So rather than having natural ventilation or just holes in your wall, obviously you're putting in a heat pump system. Having a hole in your wall is not a great idea. So the minimum of ventilation standards would be demand control ventilation, which is DCV. So that's a closed vent that works through with a moisture strip. So there's little fins on the side of the vent, and they only open when there's moisture in the air. So you'll never have mold. Moisture is always taken out of the room. So even if you had a group of people in one room, the moisture strip will sense the extra moisture in the air and the fins open up. But you're not getting the heat loss that you would get through a hole in the wall.
A hole that's always open, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of retrofitting, DCV is probably the best way to go. Mechanical ventilation with heat recovery is about twice the price for one thing. But if you have a 2-story building, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery is ducted to every vent. So you have duct runs to get back to your filter system. So you have ducts running all over the house, which will end up with boxing in. It's possible, obviously, in a bungalow because you can run everything in the attic, but in a 2-story situation, it's difficult. But the DCV option is a very good option. They're a great system. You have mechanical ventilation in your wet rooms, and you have standard vents in all other habitable rooms. So
Okay.
you still have your mechanical ventilation wet rooms because obviously you need more ventilation for your showers and any sinks or anything like that.
Brilliant, Fergal. Great. Okay. And then somebody asking about the PV or photovoltaic panel grant. Do they need a special installer for these, and do they need to be registered to apply for this grant? And she's saying something about, and also then the same person had a question about heating controls. Can they apply for the heat pump grant or the heating controls, or both?
Yes, just on the PV or any measure you're going through a grant, they'll have to be registered with FDI. All contractors have to be registered. If they're just doing a single measure in terms of PV, well, there's loads of PV companies out there. They're popping up all the time. I would talk to them directly. They generally take the actual grant off the cost as well.
Okay, great.
You pay the remainder, they'll wait for the grant anything. But definitely I'd talk to, there's a list of contractors for any measure you're looking for. There's a list of FDI registered contractors on their website. So whether you're looking for insulation or PV or whatever you're looking for in your area, there's a full list of them there.
Great.
And obviously shop around and you tend to find out who knows what they're talking about very early on, you know.
Yeah,
So
no, and it's so
talking
worth
to
it. Yeah, that's really good advice. I think don't just go with the first person you talk to.
No.
Talk to a few people, you know, and everybody you talk to, you're going to learn something else. So it's a valuable exercise anyway. And Fergal, who applies then for that grant? Is it that installer or the individual?
The system for the one-off grants is set up that either of them can apply. The installer can apply or the homeowner can apply. It's just down to MPRN numbers. When you're applying for a PV grant, and you just need the name of the installer, your MPRN, and that's an overnight decision.
Great.
You'll get an email the following day saying you're approved, and then I think with COVID they've pushed it out. It used to be 8 months to use it, but now I think it's 10. So you could get approval and still have 8 months to sort it out. But obviously do your research first and pick your contractor based on how you're going with your contractor, and just take it from there then.
Brilliant. And for those one-off grants, Fergal, what do you need to have in place before you apply? Is it a case that you apply and then go looking for the product, or do you need quotes and have decided who you're working with and stuff?
Yeah, I'd work with the quotes first and have a contractor in mind, because as part of the application you have to pick a contractor that's going to do the work.
Okay.
You'd have that done first. I suppose the heat pump grant is the one with the most work before you apply, that you have to have a technical assessment completed. So that will have to be uploaded with the application. The rest of them are all straightforward, but you would have to know who you're going to use. So look at all these things. I mean, a bit of research and planning and talking to contractors. I mean, we all know from talking to people whether they're, you know, and references, whatever you can use or whatever you feel comfortable with. The more information you have, the better. And you know, like, I mean, definitely research who you're.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, for sure. No. Great advice. And actually, I saw just a couple of questions coming in there. So somebody asking, can landlords apply for grants for rented out properties?
Yes, it's down to, landlords can apply. Tenants can apply if they want to spend money for the landlord. It's just down to the house. You can apply once you have permission, but landlords certainly, yes. And you will see in the next couple of years there will be a big push on trying to get landlords to upgrade the properties. I suppose the rental market is the one that falls in between the cracks. They don't have a minimum standard, and they can't bring in too high a standard, and they can't bring in too low a standard. So it's a conundrum about how to sort out the rental market. But yes, landlords can apply, and it's like, the problem with retrofitting is that it's the occupier that gets the benefits from the retrofit. So do you end up in a situation where the landlord says, well, the rent is going up because your bills are gone down? You know, I mean, that's a tough one that I won't be able to answer, Denise. So I don't know how they're going to sort that one out, but I mean, there will be minimum standards. I mean, that's where we're heading with all housing. That we're going to have minimum standards. But it's just that, how do you bring it in without every landlord in the country selling their house in the morning because it's going to cost them money or whatever? But yeah, certainly the answer is landlords can apply for it.
They can apply, and it's like you explained last time, Fergal. It's the grants are based on the property, not the individual. So it does come down to the property.
Yeah, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes, as you said earlier, someone has
Yeah,
already
yeah.
applied for a cavity wall grant, and the new owner can't apply for external. So the
Mm.
grant doesn't follow the person; it stays with the house.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it works the other way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and actually just brings on to the next question. Somebody's saying if you apply for attic insulation and then down the line want to do a full upgrade, will it affect the grant?
The only way any grants will affect future grants is if you go above a C2. So the likes of PV, I'd be careful with, because if you put in a big PV system, it has a big effect on the BER. The problem with it is that you need 100 of a lift, 100 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year on your BER cert. So if you look at your BER cert, they're all in sections of each grade. So you can work out what you need to jump 100. And C2 is in around the mark to hit a B2. Above that, you're going into an A, and SEI will say that a one-off measure will get you to the B2, so they won't put you through the retrofit scheme grant.
Okay.
So just be careful in terms of how good you make your house.
Well, if you're thinking of phasing it, exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's important to kind of backtrack a little bit and think. Yeah.
Well, if you're going single measures all the way, it doesn't matter. I'm just talking about the national home retrofit scheme are for C2 and below. Whereas if you're doing, we'll call it a shallow retrofit, where you're doing it in stages, it doesn't matter if you're just doing stage after stage. But if you do your attic and then on your walls, and then you come back and say you want to get 35% for the heat pump and TV and windows, doors, just be careful that you're not gone to C2, C1 or B3. You know?
Sure. Okay. No, very interesting. My goodness. Yeah, there's an awful lot to think about, Fergal. Wow. And I think the most interesting thing is that sort of history of what's been applied for before and trying to get your head around that if this is something you're thinking of doing. So yeah, important process. Okay, brilliant. So the next thing then, let me just see, because jeepers, I just got so many questions. They all came in together, so I'm trying to make sense of them in some sort of an order. Oh yes, somebody asking about how to, if they have concrete floors, how to insulate, like if they're insulating and putting in underfloor heating. Let me just see if I can, and the grants with heating, what the best options are, Fergal, if people are just looking purely at heating, improving their heating systems.
Yeah, floors are an odd one because they're hugely expensive to take out and reinstate.
Yeah.
So all these grants, like everything is evaluated, and there's a value for money criteria as part of that. So you'll find it's that when you put floors in against walls or heating upgrades, they don't score well, because the energy savings, because your floors have less of a heat loss than anything else in your house would say. What ends up happening is SEI will cap it and say, well, we'll support the pipe work and the insulation, which is obviously the small part of the cost. Like digging up your floors and reinstating it is very expensive. So you won't get 35% of that kind of for that, purely because it just doesn't score well on the value for money. For what you're gaining in energy savings versus what you're spending, it's a poor outcome, you know. Obviously, if you're taking up floors anyway, it makes sense that you'll get something towards it. But floors are often ignored in retrofit purely because of the expense. Obviously, suspended timber floors are easier to deal with, but when you talk about concrete floors, pulling them out and putting them back in is very expensive and disruptive, and everything that goes with it.
So, Fergal, how do people get advice? You know, what is the best way? Is it that technical assessment, or is it talking to somebody like yourself, or, you know?
Yeah, either way. I mean, like, a competent BER assessor will know his industry, know what's available, and obviously they're going to advise. And a lot of the better BER assessors will give you some indication of price, and you can just weigh it up for yourself. And like, the problem is that there's a lot of misinformation out there that, like, if you spend 100,000 on your house, you're going to get 35,000 because of the 35% grant. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way, because everything is scored, and you know, like, that's why they use up to 35% in their guidelines. But like you should achieve what well above, let me say, over 30% anyway, no matter what house you're looking at. But yeah, it's just things like that where there's huge expense and the value for money. Like for another example, it's down to like windows, for example. SEI support windows based on a white PVC triple glaze because they're looking at thermal performance. And if you want to go with Aluclad, they're not going to say, well, we're going to support that at 35%. They support the lower cost because at the end of the day, they don't care about aesthetics. They care about what the energy savings are. And so there's another example of people who come to me and they say, my windows are 40,000, so I'll get 35% of that. And I'll be saying, well, not really. You'll get 35% of the equivalent value of PVC because the U value is the same and people kind of call the white PVC the bog standard, but it's a serious level to be bog standard.
Oh, it is now.
Very good window, you know.
Yeah, high performing window.
But they're the kind of things that come up where I suppose there's a bit of confusion in terms of people who come back and say, well, that's not 35% of what I'm spending. And it might not be, but if you're going above and beyond, you know, and look, that's the same in any measure. I mean, you can go mad in any measure, and you know, that's just the way it is. It's based on the actual savings. Aesthetics don't come into it.
No. But then, as you say, like you would encourage people to go above and beyond if the budget allows. Why not? Yeah,
but like I think one of the questions you sent me was actually about windows and will double glazing make a big difference if I change to single glaze? Of course it will, but I'd be saying if you're taking out the windows, why wouldn't you put them in triple glaze?
Why not?
And you'd say, and the difference now is actually it's getting smaller and smaller in price difference. That's a combination of a few things, and that double glazing is actually getting better, and triple glazing is you know is the best we have at the minute, we say, or it's a very high standard. But if you were to look at, say, 20 square meters of windows in a house, and if it costs you 50 euros extra a square meter for triple glaze, it's an extra €1,000. Well, I'd certainly be going that way because you won't be doing it again. There's no way you'll take your windows out again and go triple glaze, you know. So again, and it does come down to budget and affordability, and I understand all of that, but I would certainly be pushing for putting the money into the fabric rather than maybe that couch and thing you're looking at, you know.
Well, things you can do that down the line, and like we discussed this last week with Patricia, you know, how to prioritize, and really it is getting the layout right, getting the structure right, getting the fabric right, thinking about your comfort, because there's no point in having the most amazing kitchen if your house is freezing or uncomfortable, you know. So these things are such a worthwhile investment, and I mean, definitely windows. It's the one thing I would say that's worth going all out on.
Well, it's hard to prioritize insulation that you can't see.
Well, this is it.
Kitchen, you know, so, but absolutely, you do have to prioritize the, you know, the running cost of the house. I mean, you'll be able to afford that new kitchen in no time.
In no time. Well, this is it. This is it. No, brilliant. And I see a question here, just somebody saying that they have a B3 rated home already. They've insulated. Are there other grants they can apply for?
It's just the Oneoff grants, the Better Energy Home grants, depending on, like, they could be sitting with a B3 with an oil or gas boiler. So I'd obviously be recommending a heat pump upgrade. But you're into Oneoff grants when you're at that standard, you know.
Okay.
A heat pump, if they do have oil or gas, a heat pump will bring them into the A bracket anyway.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. And could you just explain the cutoff again then? So for the Oneoff grants, and then if they fall into the scheme.
Well, for the 32 or the 35% grants, you're looking at C2 and below. And anything above that, if you look at the scale, like the likes of heat pumps or PV will pull you up over the B2 anyway. So that's really the cutoff, C2.
Okay. Really, really good. Brilliant. Oh yes, and then there was this question which I thought was interesting. So somebody wanting to avail of the 35% grant, but they want to purchase their own windows from their brother at cost. Can they do that?
Oh God.
Yes,
of course they can. But I'm reading between the lines here. So, do they want to claim a grant on the full price and then get a reduced price?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't pick that up at all.
I suppose the problem is that it's not a problem, but when you come to someone like a Burberry Retrofit, we're offering a full package, and at the end of the day, it's a business, and we're adding our markup to it, the same as any other contractor in the country. So, essentially, what would happen there is that they would get the windows, and we would add a markup to it, and then no one would be happy then because they'd be saying, "Sure, why you get that?" But that's, I mean, we have our own setup in terms of installers, and so it's not like there's other options for that kind of thing where you can go to one of the energy agencies that just offer a project management role. I suppose when I'm talking as a contractor, and if we're securing grants, we're doing the works. That's just the way it works, because obviously that's the system. But you could go to an energy agency that just do a project management role, and then you can pick your own contractors in terms of each different measure. And then they project manage it. The energy agency will project manage it and apply for the grant and all that kind of thing. But look, it's just two different options for the same service kind of thing.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, very good. And then somebody just asking, most of their construction's already done. Can they still apply?
No.
No, really.
No.
So, even if though, Fergal, let's say they hadn't applied for, I don't know. Is there anything?
Sorry, when I say no, I mean the grant can't be applied for retrospectively. So.
Yeah. Okay.
If you have a heat pump in, you can't then go and apply for a heat pump.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. If
you can't go back.
Right. Okay.
So
yeah.
Like all these grants have to be approved before you proceed. That's the way it is.
But what if you were extending and you hadn't sort of, you had started, the work had literally just started?
Yeah, obviously you can do all the work you want as long as it's not one of the energy efficiency measures you've applied
Fine.
for.
Okay.
So you can have everything ready to go, and a lot of people do that. Where I suppose you were talking about extensions earlier.
Yeah.
They might have the skeleton of the extension up and ready to go kind of thing, and ready to break through. That kind of thing. That's by all means that's very helpful to the retrofit contractor.
Okay.
They're not trying to coordinate as much.
Yeah.
So, and again, that kind of thing is like people put in underfloor heating in their extension.
Yeah.
So, like from our point of view, obviously the easiest heat pump installation is what we would call a plug and play, in that we're coming in and hooking into an existing system. But if all that's set up already, that's perfect. And it doesn't affect the grant in any way, because, I mean, your new build is you have to go with building regulations, which is bringing you up to an A2 anyway.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't in any way affect the grant.
Okay.
But you just can't proceed with any of the energy
efficiency work, and you can't have purchased anything either. So, like, you couldn't have purchased windows, for example.
Yeah, well, again, that's back to what I was saying, in that if you're coming through a service provider like ourselves, we're doing all the purchasing. Like, just to explain on the window thing and why we wouldn't get involved in that, is because we, like SEI, have a invoice receipt tracking that they obviously track all the money that are spent on a project. So in the case of someone buying their own windows, essentially we have to pay for the windows. So I mean, it's a bit of a mess where we're paying and they're getting a refund, and it's kind of it's just messy. So that's why we don't get involved in it.
Sure.
And that's the reason why, so everything is tracked. As you can imagine, this is government money, and we have to, they have to justify what's being spent in grants. So everything is tracked like that,
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. Brilliant. Well, listen, Fergal, thank you so much. I think that's really covered a lot, and really interesting, actually. Lots for people to think about. And I think, doing your research, speaking to different providers in particular, if you're considering any of these things, it's so important. So yeah, plenty for people to think about, but definitely more people should be availing of these grants. Like, it seems mad that they're not.
Absolutely, and you'll see that when the system changes over, the timelines are gone as well. So we used to work in a kind of a seasonal pocket of time where grants were applied for in January, you get to go ahead in April, March, and it has to be completed by October. But when the new system comes in, it'll be a matter of you just claim the grant when you're finished. So it'll streamline everything better, and people aren't under kind of pressure, and things can be planned better, because all these retrofits are really down to planning, and certainly any homeowners looking at it, I would certainly research and plan as much as I can before jumping into anything.
Yeah, okay, great. And then just see a really good question there that's come in. I promise it's the last one now, Fergal. But she's saying, is there a timeline for the work to be completed when a grant is approved? And if so, are there current supply and scheduling difficulties? Are you been impacted by that? Because I know that there's huge issues with certain materials, windows and fitting and all sorts of things. So and
again, we have, I suppose, our own setup in that we have manufacturer and supplier of windows that we still have our same lead-in time. Now, windows always had the longest lead-in time of any measure. So we are certainly protected to a certain level in that. But like anyone else in this industry, we're upscaling. And yes, it's difficult to upscale because the skills of labour aren't out there. Any grant that has been approved or is in application at the minute has still an October finishing deadline. So yes, it's about program of works and planning again about how much we can do. So like we have a few pre-approved approvals where we put in with the notional housing to just have grants sitting there that if someone comes to it and it suits their house, it'll be pre-approved stuff, you know. But we wouldn't be putting in any more applications at this stage because the timelines are against it. Like, especially if you add 6 weeks for approval, you're heading in close to July kind of thing, and then
it's too tight.
October, you know? So
Okay.
I wouldn't be putting us or any homeowner under the stress of doing that.
No. Well, it's like working to a Christmas deadline. It's never ever a good idea.
Everyone wants to be in for Christmas.
Oh no. So you want to start planning January if that's the case. Yeah. Definitely. Okay. Well, listen, Fergal, thank you so much. You're an absolute wealth of information. Brilliant chatting to you. And yes, hopefully everybody got something out of that and we answered all the questions. But thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks a million, Denise. Great talking to you again.
Okay. See you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.